Stablecoins is certainly a natural evolution of money. This will be the most exciting evolution of our form of payment, as it will allow programmable payments, something that former payment methods like Apple Pay, like credit card, have not been able to implement on a mainstream basis. Stablecoins were described as a kind of a Trojan horse for US dollar dominance. However, stablecoins in the United States has emerged as the solution to fight back de-dollarization across the world. United States-based ISO-compliant projects like Hedera, Ripple, Stellar, and even projects like Hyperledger via Quant. These are projects that I'm seeing gain real-world adoption, but HBAR is certainly my number one AI asset when it comes to taking advantage of this huge shift. And Quant being the most scarce ISO-compliant token, more scarce than Bitcoin, that also contributes to why it will continue to, why it will have a higher price in the future compared to its 3-digit price now. Quant being interoperable with platforms like Ripple, Stellar, R3 Algorand, and IOTA. These are all explicitly named in illustrations put out by the Overledger Foundation, and these projects will work together and they will all dominate in the specific lanes and the specific industries that they're targeting. These 8 ISO compliant tokens have been chosen for their specific unique needs to improve the Swift system, and individually they can't fix the entire system. I would say we are certainly in the early days of alt season, but I would say outright dangerous to not understand the type of alt season that we are entering at this moment. We are certainly not entering a meme coin dominated alt season, a speculative alt season, a retail driven alt season. The entire investor profile of the cryptocurrency market has changed. Personally have seen enough regarding Tether and its history. Tether has risky assets as of 2025 on its balance sheet. Departure of Tether eventually from the cryptocurrency market and being replaced by compliant alternatives like RLUSD and USDC. That process is happening right now. USDT dominance is declining for the first time in its history.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the All in Crypto podcast. I am your host, Rupert. And today I am delighted to be announcing a familiar face. We have Smoke back on the show to talk to us about some interesting developments in the cryptocurrency space. And if you guys aren't familiar with Smoke, you absolutely should be. He's my go-to when it comes to research around the cryptocurrency space broadly, specifically ISO. You know, you're talking about XRP, XLM, XDC. I mean, he's absolutely on fire. And there's a link to his X account in the description. But enough of the blowing smoke. How are you, Smoke?
I'm doing well, Rupert. Thanks for the invite back. Excited for the conversation today.
It's always an absolute pleasure, and a lot's happened since we last caught up. One thing is that we've seen the passing of the Genius Act. Now, the Genius Act is predominantly or is focused around stable coins, and what we see is the President of the United States talk about a new financial system being formed on state-of-the-art cryptocurrencies. We see David Sachs talk about a similar thing. We see Scott Bessent, the Treasury of the United States, talk about adoption of this technology, specifically stablecoins, to enable the United States. Maybe I just put this question to you. What, in your opinion, does the Genius Act signify, and how much of a big deal is it?
The Genius Act is certainly the first step into the new digital age that we're going into as a international financial system. The Genius Act basically is the green light for all stablecoin issuers to finally bring their products into the market. So that includes issuers like Ripple, Stellar with their now PayPal integration, stablecoin integration. But also the Genius Act will extend to all public blockchains that have stablecoins on them. Algorand has a stablecoin. IOTA now has a stablecoin. XDC has a stablecoin as well. So these ISO compliant blockchains will benefit from stablecoin regulatory clarity as well. But specifically, like coins like XRP will benefit from RLUSD receiving that regulatory compliance from the Genius Act, and the credibility boost from the Genius Act will drive increased institutional adoption of coins like XRP, as RUSD on XRP ledger utilizes XRP for every transaction. So the increased adoption of RUSD because of this increased regulatory clarity will certainly boost the activity on XRP ledger, along with other compliant blockchains that are issuing stablecoins and are operating in a regulated manner.
Yeah, and do you see stablecoins as the kind of evolution of money? Because I often riff this with people, and I think money takes different forms and has done throughout history. Often due to convenience. It wasn't convenient for us to carry around bags of sugar or coal or whatever it was, and sort of use it to pay. And often when we sort of unlock a new technology, money takes a new form. Do you think that stable coins are kind of the evolution of money? What do you see there?
Stablecoins is certainly a natural evolution of money. When you think of the beginning era, the earlier days of transacting, started off with commodities, goods, and evolved to um, physical cash. And if you fast forward to modern days, we have credit cards, Apple Pay, and the next iteration after that is tokenized cash, digital money, stable coins. And you can in a way you can say this is the final form of money, as you don't get past digital when it comes to evolution regarding technology. But this will be the most exciting evolution of our form of payment, as it will allow programmable payments, something that former payment methods like Apple Pay, like credit cards, have not been able to necessarily implement on a mainstream basis. And stablecoins already having such large infrastructure built out, such a lot of liquidity already pumped in through the crypto ecosystem via tokenized cash and digital dollars, actually being legalized from a federal perspective, allows the promised utility of tokenized cash, of instant cross-border payments, international transactions for fractions of a penny. That's actually going to become a reality for stablecoins, which will be a major value unlock for the unbanked, even people who are regular users of bank accounts. Stablecoins will be the evolution of a bank account where everyone will keep the money that they're spending on a regular basis using stablecoins at cash registers, Apple Pay. Stablecoins will pretty much proliferate all of our lives and the ways that we do payments on the internet.
We've always said this, everyone's going to be using this technology, DLT technology, without even perhaps understanding it or knowing that it's the kind of rails that it runs upon. And I think stablecoins are a great example of that. And I always think that actually, when you figure out a way to facilitate payments with distributed ledgers and stable coins, you could actually unlock a major boom in the kind of payment industry, because you can do things that just simply weren't possible with the kind of traditional rails that we're moving away from. So it's exceptionally exciting. What's your thoughts on the Treasury and what they're talking about? I mean, Brian Brooks has been speaking about this for a long time, and the fact that the United States should adopt stable coins to essentially introduce a purchaser to US treasuries at a time when Bitcoin came about in 2008, really to question the whole debt fiat system. And stable coins have kind of been introduced as a savior to it, introducing a purchaser to it globally. Effectively, if you're buying a stable coin, the preferred apparatus to back it up is short-term treasuries. Also, they've spoken about how doing that, they can lower interest rates and they can further dollar dominance. Is this the US's plan?
That's exactly the US's plan. I've actually posted a document on X recently where stablecoins were described as a kind of a Trojan horse for US dollar dominance. Over the last few years, it has been an increasing conversation of de-dollarization um, from efforts from the BRICS and Russia and China.
Yep.
However, stablecoins in the United States has emerged as the solution to fight back de-dollarization across the world. With stablecoins, the United States doesn't need to force other nations or even SWIFT to use the dollar. Other countries and other unbanked unbanked populations can have access to the dollar just while having a cell phone and a Wi-Fi connection. And by promoting US dollar backed stablecoins, the United States doesn't even need to force other countries to use the dollar as it would want to fight back de-dollarization. But promoting US dollar backed stablecoins reinforces the dollar's reach organically. And the dollar is already positioned to be the dominant um, currency, even in the digital realm, even if its dominance is failing in the physical realm, because 99% of all transaction in the cryptocurrency realm is denominated in dollars. 95% of all stablecoins are denominated in dollars. So as long as the United States gets behind stablecoins as a technology, as a payment method, and promote um, United States located Ripple, stablecoin issuers like Ripple, like RUSD across the world, that will organically increase the demand for the dollar and allow the United States to fight back de-dollarization in an effective way.
And I think this is huge for the underlying cryptocurrency projects like XRP, XLM, XDC. You know, there's many out there that we're not mentioning, because if you look at how, or one reason the United States has kind of asserted dominance previously, it's through their internet companies. You know, if you look at the power that the United States commands due to the likes of Facebook, Google, Amazon, it is really unprecedented and unmatched. And I think what we're going to witness, we know that this is their agenda, is the same kind of backing, but instead of for companies, for these underlying protocols. And I think that there's so many reasons to be bullish on the cryptocurrency space. And I talk about stable coins all the time, and people kind of go, well, what's the bullish nature of stable coins? Well, it's not in sort of playing in the stable coins necessarily. It's more the underlying technologies that unlock this upgrade for the world. And I think for the United States, which is exceptionally interesting, I know here in the UK, I mean, I looked into it. There's nothing stopping me from using US dollar stablecoins for business to conduct my business here in the UK. There's nothing stopping me from paying my employees in it. There's nothing stopping me from using it other than the infrastructure hasn't been built out yet. But there's every reason for it too, because of the kind of modernization. You know, if you look at fees right now on the internet, when you make payments, they're quite astronomical. Stablecoins fractionalize that. So this is going to bring me perfectly on to where I want to take this. And that is the fact that other countries need to start getting a move on. We spoke to Rob Allen earlier this month, who is working on Project Acacia with the Reserve Bank of Australia, the Central Bank of Australia, and they're looking to conduct pilots around wholesale CBDCs and essentially introducing the Australian digital dollar via this technology. And one thing that we riffed was that actually it becomes a matter of national monetary sovereignty, otherwise the world gets dollarized. How are you seeing other countries react to this? I know you shared a document where the official 2025 European banking authorities had met with Ripple to essentially discuss real USD and other such things. How is the rest of the world preparing for the Goliath that is dollar stablecoins?
So, the anecdote that you mentioned about the advantages as a European to dollar denominated stablecoins, that's the exact reason why Europe is playing a much different game when it comes to tokenized cash regulations. The United States, on one hand, as we can see with the Genius Act, is taking a pro
Yep.
stablecoin approach, a pro stablecoin issuer approach, and that is to embrace and regulate that, as we just discussed, to promote dollar dominance in a digital era. However, Europe is taking a different approach to preserve the euro as a currency and that's the CBDC route. So, the digital euro, as we know, is the launch is upcoming, imminent in the fall, and the final plans for the delivery of the digital euros coming up, and that's been accelerated as a result of the stablecoin progress in the United States. So the euro's strategy to promote the use of the euro and limit the dollar's influence on the euro and within the European Union is basically embracing the digital euro CBDCs and to fight back against the United States influence and compete with United States stablecoins. So that's pretty much why in the future you most likely won't see a wide range of stablecoin options in the EU, as this digital euro, the CBDC approach is their way to fight back against the United States and their dominance of the US dollar.
Yeah, and I want to take us a step back because one thing that I think you do probably better than anybody is actually show, you know, when we talk about the Genius Act and what that's enabling, you can actually link specific projects um, to things that are taking place and sort of show documentation that shows their relevancy and they're kind of standing out to you can show the documentation behind this that links them to this great undertaking that's taking place. Before we explore maybe what crypto projects are perhaps playing a role in Europe, we know that Quant, of course, has been mentioned in the ECB's digital euro correlation, and we can maybe or composition, and we can maybe explore that. In America, what DLTs? I know we touched on it briefly. Do you think are actually going to or have a front and center position in this? You've spoken about XRP, obviously driven largely by Ripple. You've spoken about XLM. What crypto do you see as winners from a United States point of view? And then we'll talk more broadly about Europe and the rest of the world.
So ISO compliant assets that are United States based are Ripple, of course, Stellar,
Yep.
and even projects like Chainlink isn't United States based. But when you think of ISO compliance and the fact that ISO compliant tokens have to be internationally used, and that's why projects like FedNow and even FedWire migrated to the ISO standard. The whole point of the ISO standard was to make these protocols that may not be based in the United States um, accessible to the United States, but United States-based ISO compliant projects like Hedera, Ripple, Stellar, and even projects like Hyperledger via Quant. These are projects that I'm seeing gain real world adoption in the United States when it comes to even HBAR and its participation in the artificial intelligence arena. They have a partnership with NVIDIA, which is behind the chips behind ChatGPT. And I like to bring that up simply because people are always looking for an AI investment, and it's not necessarily on the forefront of HBAR and its marketing strategy when it comes to how much they're involved in the AI space. But HBAR is certainly um, my number one AI asset when it comes to taking advantage of this huge shift because HBAR is basically securing the data that artificial intelligence models are using, large language models are using, which will secure our future when it comes to, I would say, rogue data that AI may be using to produce incorrect information. HBAR basically secures that information and tracks all the data that AI can be trained on and allowing companies to trust the data that their AI is being trained on. So HBAR being integrated into all of NVIDIA AI chips, that's extremely bullish for its future and definitely extremely bullish from like the United States perspective as well.
People don't quite equate that. I mean, I really look at Hedera as a kind of global way to trust. It's a kind of trust ledger, and I think that's very interesting. And it's increasingly becoming recognized as a key component to actually enabling AI. If you listen to all the old school AI people, one thing that they always say with AI is the danger is provenance. How do you track that provenance to ensure a safe, reliable AI model? And Hedera's kind of filled that role. They're also I've got a brother who works for a large healthcare firm. We're actually looking at using potentially Hedera to solve some of the issues with healthcare that we have here in the UK. So its applications are broad. And talking about kind of the United States, we've just sort of pivoted to Europe. What like are you just going to have kind of United States specific projects? Like people talk about US cryptos. What kind of traction are you seeing with cryptocurrency projects in Europe? Perhaps linked to the digital euro, the ECB CBDC project, but there are also further projects outside of that, like Qantas with their digital euro. I know they're using Algorand and a number of others, and work with the Dutch central bank. What projects are you seeing play a role in Europe with all this?
So recently I've seen that I'm not sure if you're familiar with the stablecoin EURS by Stasis. It's the
Yes.
oldest and only fully compliant regulated euro stablecoin on the market. It has a 5-year track record and over 6 billion euros transferred on chain across five major blockchains. But the block ISO compliant blockchains that are participating in this project, the stablecoin is XRP, XRC, and Algorand. And I think this is a perfect example on how ISO compliant tokens will be interoperable and equally useful when it comes to issuing stablecoins or even facilitating the back office management of central banks. And that's simply the reason why I concentrate my investments on ISO compliant tokens simply because of their nature to all require each other to fulfill the well-rounded potential of all of these assets when it comes to delivering value for the international financial system. All of these assets are found in different parts of the world, but interoperating with each other, and that's only possible because of the ISO standard. And coins that aren't ISO compliant will not be involved or regulated in an international way that allows them to be useful to central banks.
Yeah, I mean, and in regards to the ECB's CBDC pilot coming to a kind of head in October, what are you seeing there? Obviously, Quant was mentioned. I think people still don't understand that Quant is an overledger system that essentially enables access to the cryptocurrency space via APIs. It's not going to be the DLT to enable perhaps a digital euro, but certainly enable enterprises and institutions to plug into the distributed ledgers that enable that. You know, what players are you seeing play a role as far as the ECB is concerned and what they're trying to do?
So quant, just to simplify, it's
Yeah.
how it will be involved in the case. So it differs from the interledger protocol, which allows interoperability between different ledgers, which can be non-blockchain ledgers, so bank ledgers, blockchain ledgers. That allows interoperability between those. Quant, on the other hand, develops apps that has interoperability within each app. So a Quant over ledger app can involves several public blockchains within one app to connect to other blockchains and other apps. So that's different than just having a platform, a lightweight internet-based platform like the Interledger protocol from Ripple. Quant has one builds apps that are interoperable with several different blockchains. So those apps that will be able to use the euro. It won't be an issue to transact that digital euro across several blockchains using Quant's Overledger platform, and every transaction on the Overledger platform uses the Quant token. So that's the where the
Wow.
utility of the Quant token comes in between um, crossing crossing chains over the Interledger platform, and that's where Quant is used as basically a gas token to facilitate those transactions. And Quant being the I would say the most scarce ISO compliant token, more scarce than Bitcoin. That also contributes to why it will continue to why it will have a higher price in the future compared to its 3-digit price now, which may scare some people as a expensive asset, but it's also about $1 billion in market cap. And just for a comparison, XRP is about $200 billion in market cap. So even though Quant is a 3-digit asset, it's 200 times cheaper than XRP, which is the largest ISO compliant asset by market cap.
Yeah, only 14 million quant right now. So you know, you're talking about nearly half of Bitcoin's max supply. Well, over half, talking about 70-ish% of Bitcoin's max supply. Yeah, I think quant is a real underdog right now, as many of the ISO coins actually are. Do you see specific links with quant? I mean, Gilbert Verdry, I always bring this up as a big Hedera fan, mentioned that you know, if you want to get something done fast and efficiently, use Hedera. There's a video clip of him actually saying that. Do you see any specific links with quant and certain DLTs? Obviously, the ISO ones are probably at the forefront of that. You know, do you see relationships there that might give us some inklings?
Yeah, so I've posted on my page several times of Quant just being interoperable with platforms like Ripple, Stellar, R3 Quarter,
Yep.
Algorand, IOTA. These are all explicitly named in illustrations put out by the Overledger
Yep.
Foundation and Hyperledger as well. So that's another reason why it's pretty hard to separate the utility and separate these assets and their value when and the enterprise mainstream use case, these projects will work together and they will all dominate in the specific lanes and the specific industries that they're targeting, but they won't be able to do it alone. They need each other to fit each and every part, each and every I would say downfall to the financial system. These 8 ISO compliant tokens have been chosen for their specific unique needs to improve the Swift system. And individually, they can't fix the entire system. That's why it's 8 of them, and why diversification among those 8 is recommended as the top utility tokens that will gain the most market share in the cryptocurrency market over the long term.
Yeah. So we've looked at Europe. We've looked at the United States. Let's go further afield. I mentioned the conversation that I had with Rob Allen, and he's obviously working on Project Acacia, and Hedera's mentioned there. Obviously, Ethereum's also mentioned there. I think R3 Corridors mentioned there as well. What do you see the rest of the world doing? because for example, here in the UK, I keep banging the drum about we need to adopt this or we get dollarized. Because why wouldn't somebody like me use the dollar for the benefits, the stablecoin dollars for the benefits that it's going to bring? What do you see perhaps across or further afield? So it could be the UK, it could be over in Japan or China, or what are you seeing further afield, and what blockchains do you see implemented in this kind of evolution of money?
I would say what's coming to mind right now is IOTA.
Yep.
There's several announcements coming out of from IOTA and its advancements in the Internet of Things IoT field. They just recently announced a partnership with the World Economic Forum regarding supply chain tokenization across Africa. They also are responsible for the digitization of passports across the world. So
Wow.
IOTA being one of the smallest ISO compliant assets by market cap, it's less than $1 billion. It's certainly an undervalued token as it's partnered with some of the biggest financial institutions in the world. And the untapped potential of Africa is also being discovered by IOTA as well. So a token that's aligned with a future industry like IoT, which is currently rapidly growing as internet protocols are becoming more popular to develop, deploy technology on, and AI data models. IOTA is playing a significant role in that realm. And seeing that it is partnered with the World Economic Forum is certainly a testament to the trustworthiness and the credibility of its blockchain and its technology, as well as the team behind it, because the World Economic Forum is one of the most influential organizations on the planet, and to choose IOTA as a technical platform to deploy next generation technology to facilitate value across the continent of Africa, which has extremely untapped potential. Um, that's certainly a bullish development for the IOTA token and the holders of IOTA as well.
Yeah, wow. And when do you see all this kind of coming to a head? Timelines are very hard to give. We know the ECB, of course, has announced October. We know that we see sort of ISO integration in November. We know that we're seeing the progression in the United States. You see the kind of infrastructure being put in by major payment providers already. It was obviously PayPal. All the kind of global payment issuers are moving towards this technology. What kind of a timeline do you envision? Like, do you envision perhaps next year that we're using stable coins? I mean, this is going to take a while, right? It's not just going to be an instant overnight thing, but could you put a timeline on this?
So I would say that is a fair assessment of stablecoins that we may see the mainstream adoption of stablecoins in the near term. And in the near term, from the institutional perspective, that could be as soon as a year. Regarding timelines and regarding what we should expect in the near term, we are just to set the stage for any viewers that may be new to crypto or may not understand how far we've come as an industry, is that for many years, I would say over a decade, it was simply all you heard about news from cryptocurrency projects was pilots, um, tests, experimentations, not necessarily moving to real world value, real world implementation. The reports from pilots, the reports from experimentations and projects that weren't for the public, but we've had plenty of those reports and plenty of years of that. And for the first time, we're finally making that transition from the experimentation phase of crypto to the real world adoption phase of crypto. And this upcoming fall, the last quarter of 2025, is full of plenty of deadlines, plenty of launch dates of cryptocurrency based projects, altcoin projects, blockchain based services, tokenized deposits, stablecoin projects. And this is all happening simultaneously with regulatory clarity, international regulatory clarity becoming a reality, along
ETF
with the
approvals. Yeah.
ETF approvals. That's certainly one of the things that I'm most bullish on regarding this upcoming alt season will be the institutional access to altcoins via ETFs. There is even documentation that I share within the smoke room that institutions aren't necessarily even focusing on altcoins that don't have ETF narratives regarding their future potential. So the coin that you're focused on having an ETF in Europe or the United States is certainly bullish for its future, which means it has staying power. And I would certainly say it's a red flag if your token does not have the same serious conversation regarding its use case and its adoption on a high level regarding being integrated into traditional systems and having ETPs or ETFs launched behind it. And that's certainly the phase of crypto adoption that we're entering, and that's basically the takeoff phase where the most projects are going to be launched, the most value is going to be launched in a short period of time. And again, from the institutional perspective, a short period of time, near term, that can all be in less than a year. So it may not be an overnight transformation, but it will seem like it from the massive and drastic changes that we will see from the introduction of blockchain-based technology.
Wow, it's exciting. It's going to be an exciting sort of run up to the end of the year and certainly 2026. And you talk about kind of alt season. Where do you so the cryptocurrency space has really been following the Bitcoin 4-year cycle, which there's sort of economic cycles that overlay with it, like PMI cycles and things like this. Where do you think we are? You know, you've spoken to me previously about your thoughts on the Bitcoin 4-year cycle and how we may no longer be following that. You know, where do you think we are perhaps in retrospect to alt season? I mean, we're only starting to see Ethereum really put in some ground and perhaps an institutional shift. You know, we speak to ETP providers in Europe and they're seeing flows favor Ethereum over the past couple of weeks. We're seeing ETH strategy companies pop up. Where do you think we are in regards to alt season? I mean, am I correct? And I might guess that your opinion here is that we haven't even really seen one in comparison with what's coming based on the things you just said there.
I would say we are certainly in the early days of all season. Um, Falling Bitcoin dominance is certainly one of the first indicators of all season,
Yep.
and as you mentioned, Ethereum's outperformance is another indicator of all season. But it is also, I would say, outright dangerous to not understand the type of all season that we are entering at this moment. We are certainly not entering a meme coin dominated all season, a speculative all season, a retail driven all season. The entire investor profile of the cryptocurrency market has changed. It's institution driven. It's professional money. It's sophisticated money, smart money that is dictating the next moves of the market. Even back to the conversations of ETFs, altcoin rotations occurred in previous cycles from um, retail investors cashing in their Bitcoin profits on exchanges and rotating those profits into smaller cap altcoins, and which caused the broad rise of altcoins, no matter what their use case was or if they're speculative nature. However, the cryptocurrency market has shifted drastically even over the last 6 months, with now ETFs being the primary vehicle in which cryptocurrencies are acquired by financial institutions and sophisticated investors. And these sophisticated investors aren't necessarily taking the same retail route of cashing in their ETFs to rotate into their next favorite altcoin. So Bitcoin ETFs aren't going to the capital and liquidity from Bitcoin ETFs aren't going to rotate into all altcoins like previous cycles have done. And this upcoming off season will primarily be concentrated to a handful of projects. And that's exactly the reason why I'm so strict and disciplined on my approach to accumulate ISO compliant assets, because these assets have proven to have the most utility. And this altcoin season will be focused on utility projects. And we have even been observing the outperformance of these utility token projects with the implementation of even the Genius Act over the last few months. These compliant tokens, these regulated projects that are in the conversations of the most powerful financial institutions in the world, these tokens are outperforming Bitcoin as we speak, and they have been doing so the entire year. And even XRP has been highlighted by the likes of Wisdom Tree and Bitwise as a project that has outperformed Bitcoin significantly, up to 300% over the last year. So it's not no longer theoretical or speculative whether these tokens will continue to outperform Bitcoin and attract more value than Bitcoin as it's happening right now. And it's safe to assume that this will continue as more regulatory clarity becomes a reality. And the most compliant, most regulated tokens will be the winners of this cycle, and choosing those tokens wisely alongside smart money, who is being very selective in the project that they're backing, the tokens and the use cases that they're co-signing. That should be the number one priority as any investor in the cryptocurrency space, is aligning your capital and your resources with projects that have real world use cases, simply because that's where institutional money is flowing into, and the adoption and integration of these tokens are happening as we speak.
Yep. And like I say, guys, if you're not already following Smoke, now's the time. There's a link into his X account in the description, because you uncover a hell of a lot of documentation that, quite frankly, the public has never feasted their eyes upon. And it talks about where you're seeing real world applications for these DLTs. And it really does. And we should stress this point, really give us an anchorage in regards to where we are. This space hasn't, first of all, even been allowed to really be an asset class and achieved any regulatory clarity up until now. There hasn't been financial products around it. Wall Street hasn't monetized it yet and pushed it. And on top of that, it's not even been allowed to be used really yet. And we're about to see both of those two things, the real world utility of this technology and it as an asset class, come to a head on top of all of these wonderful things that you just spoke about. And the trajectory that we go on post that, in my opinion, is nothing short of an amazing opportunity. But it's important that you pick the winners in that and don't get distracted by the hottest thing that can be here today, gone tomorrow. It truly is interesting. And I did a video yesterday, and I want to kind of riff this with you a little bit, Smoke, because you're a great guy to do it with. When I try and figure out how valuable a coin like, let's say, XRP could be, it wants to be kind of the world reserve bridge asset. I really have no. I mean, I think it's sort of price per token, and none of this is financial advice. Just a sort of building some theory around it. Depends on its success in achieving the goal that it was set out to achieve. So I looked at a video yesterday from one of Ripple's SVPs, and he basically spoke about, if XRP is successful in being the apparatus that allows the remittance of potentially trillions of dollars of value, it has to have a high price to have the liquidity in it to essentially enable all of that. Do you ever sit and think, I mean, we've got a technical target to $19.27. I think it goes significantly higher than that. That's just what we've got technical promise for. Do you ever sit and think, how high can a coin like XRP get to? I think the audience is certainly interested in that, and what's going to drive that.
Certainly. I believe that I take a more nuanced and professional approach when it comes to what will cause the price of XRP to be high, what is the rationale behind that, and why institutions, frankly, aren't worried about the short-term performance of XRP simply because of the high potential that it has. But I think from a foundational understanding, you should that's how you should look at the token from the foundational level, and where exactly is the token even being implemented at. So Ripple and XRP, the strategy behind that was never to be something that was hard to integrate, clunky technology. It was something that was supposed to be designed as a smooth integration for all businesses that want to transact value digitally across the internet. So that's why they took an internet first approach with the interledger protocol. Just simple, short internet history lesson. But in the 1980s and 90s, there were multiple protocols released to enable the development of the Internet of Information, email, content, and these protocols, these networks, these open protocols allowed anyone to build, websites and build secure connections in between different sources of information and generate video transmission, financial information transmission, and that allows us to use the internet computers with full trust and belief that we won't get hacked, that we won't um, enter a dangerous website because they're secured by HTTP protocols, information protocols. Originally, these protocols were not able to be monetized. However, with the XRP ledger and the Interledger protocol, which integrates directly with HTTP on the internet, for the first time in history, these protocols can be monetized. And for the first time in history as well, these protocols can be owned by regular people. We can own pieces of the transport layer, the value transport layer of the internet, which Ripple is building with the XRP ledger and Interledger protocol. And there was actually a statement put out by Franklin Templeton, July 2025,
From
in an
Sandy.
article that
Yeah.
the title of the article was Revolution, Not Evolution, the Crypto Dilemma, was released July 17, 2025. And they put a pretty powerful statement in there that I believe directly indicates how high the price of XRP can be, being as though it's a internet-based protocol that is designed to seamlessly integrate with any business that already uses HTTP protocols and their internal services. And the statement from Franklin Templeton said after introduced what HTTP was, it said that no companies own those protocols, no one charged for them. They were the glue that brought them together. The potential of computing, networks, and encryption. Nearly every business in existence today has been built using these protocols. And they went on to say that if they could be assigned financial value, it would be incomprehensibly high. If the individuals and institutions could have invested in these protocols, the wealth creation would have been extreme. Yet even the developers that wrote these protocols were never able to monetize their work. So saying key phrases like incomprehensibly high, the wealth creation would have been extreme, that gives you some insight into the fact that coins like XRP are extremely undervalued, that their value in the future will be significantly much more higher as the market cap of XRP is currently about 200 billion. And there's several timelines that I've seen that by 2030, post 2030, the market cap of the entire cryptocurrency market will be over 300 trillion. So knowing the fact that out of the millions of tokens that exist in the cryptocurrency market, only a handful with utility, with real world application will exist. And I would say up to 20 to 25, maximum 30 projects will have mainstream adoption post 2030. That means hundreds of trillions of dollars will be split between a handful of tokens. And that rationalizes compliant tokens, compliant networks, and these utility tokens having multi-trillion dollar market caps, with tens of trillions of dollars of market capitalization, simply because of this use case, simply because of the incomprehensibly high financial value that will be assigned to these parties because of the daily 24/7 use case to be able to transact trillions of dollars. Um, that should allow you to have a pretty concise illustration on the abundance that will exist for the holders of these projects, simply because of the trillions of dollars that is set to come into these ecosystems that have not yet come into these ecosystems.
I think you're so right. I think lots of people are looking at this. People are going to hear that and they're going to go, there's no way. Scott Bessent, who's obviously the Treasury Secretary, a remarkable man when it comes to investing. One of the only people that's ever managed to make a successful career out of short selling as a firm. Stood with George Soros when they made $1 billion from the pound. It's been mentioned multiple times by Stan Druckenmiller as one of the best. He said one thing you need as an investor, a successful investor, is imagination. And many people are going to hear that and then go, Rupert, what you want about? Why do you need to be imaginative to be an investor? Surely you should deal in the realms of what you can see, in front of you, like actually see in front of you that's there at the moment. Well, the reason he says you need an imagination is because you need to imagine a world of what ifs, in the same way that when the internet came about, there was very few people that actually could imagine the grip it would have on all of our lives. And what people like myself and certainly you do is imagine a world of what if. What if these cryptocurrencies do the things that they were built to do, and there's clear clues that they are going to, like all the documentations you show on a regular basis. What if that world becomes a reality? Well, exactly what you're saying becomes true. And the value creation on the back end of that cannot be understated. And people sort of, they've got blinkers on in regards to, they're looking around and going, well, Microsoft's valued at $4 trillion. So how on earth could a company like XRP, not a company like XRP, an asset like XRP be valued at anything more than that? The most large market cap in company in the world. Well, market cap's irrelevant when something's being used and utilized, invested in, and essentially becomes a kind of global utility token. And I don't think that was Franklin Templeton that said that. I think it was the likes of Wisdom Tree said that that's what these assets are. They're global utility tokens that are going to lubricate the digital world that we're moving towards and be worth, as an industry, I could definitely see hundreds of trillions of dollars. It's a very exciting future that we're moving towards. And I think it's in some ways God's work that the likes of yourself is doing, educating people on this and getting people on board in what is a technology that's fundamentally going to change the fabrics of how we do things. David Schwartz put out a post where he essentially said XRP's price has to be high due to the use case that it's trying to solve, because it needs the liquidity to remit this sort of stuff. Do you subscribe to that?
Not only do I subscribe to that, I've seen it. I've seen that
Wow.
documented that the higher the XRP price, the better the solution of the network. So the more liquid XRP is, the more solutions that can be provided to banks, to large
Yep.
money transmitters that need to transact value instantly for fractions of a penny. This is not necessarily a theory. This is just the use case of the XRP ledger, that it's not driven by retail speculation. It's driven by organic demand, organic utility, and being inherently deflationary, which means that XRP is burned in every transaction. And the fact that the XRP ledger is enhanced by the interledger protocol, which allows transit transactions per second, that means XRP ledger can be burnt at a rapid rate that will also accelerate its price creation to reach the level of a suitable liquidity to transact the world's value. And that's even something that I've seen documented as well, that
Wow.
there's several banks that are currently using Ripple technology, but Ripple is currently waiting for XRP's market cap to be high enough, which means that the network will be liquid enough to finally use XRP to maximize efficiency, to maximize gains. And that's truly, I would say, is the flip of the switch moment where um, banks will actually be able to use XRP in every transaction, and it will be allowed in a permitted through regulations, through legislation, and banks will finally be able to receive that 100% full value of the token of the network, along with the scalability of the interledger protocol, which was the design of Ripple solution from the onset, to combine XRP and interledger protocol to reach the I would say transaction per second that is required from all the largest banks in the world. So once that moment happens, that's certainly when we can see a rapid acceleration of the price, or whether that's over the long term, over the short term, the price of XRP when it's being used by banks will be significantly higher than it is now, pre-utilization,
Because it needs to be. If you
because
want
it
to,
needs to be.
yeah, absolutely, it needs to be. And that's there's a hell of a lot of documentation on that. I find all this truly fascinating, and you guys need to imagine a world of what if. And I think the what if isn't just what if, it's documented that we're moving towards that. This technology isn't just getting adopted because it's cool and whatever else. It's getting adopted because it's fundamentally changing the world as we know. It's modernizing the systems, and it's bringing
I
us
think
into a
most
more global
importantly,
world.
I don't mean to
Yeah.
cut you off, but I think
No,
most
no.
importantly, one powerful characteristic of all the ISO compliant assets is that these assets don't need me or you to promote them for them to be used, or for them
Yep.
to be um, adopted on a mainstream level. There are tokens out there that people believe that the more you talk about them, the higher their likelihood of being adopted. And that's
Doesn't
simply
work
a
like that.
mindset. That's the mindset from prior cycles. The last two cycles was like that, where if you promoted a token from a big enough account, it could pump the market cap up and make some people some money. However, that's not the case now. How the the most alpha, the most information that's shared regarding tokens and their use cases are shared within institutional reports that aren't always public, and retail investors are pretty slow to get those PDFs, and institutional investors aren't slow to get those PDFs. And also, the on-chain volume is driven by long-term holders, crypto whales, and not necessarily retail investors. So by attaching your expectations and embracing the theories of retail investors, you're living in the past and living in prior cycles, when there's modern factors and modern influences and catalysts that you should be paying attention to, that are um, dictating the next moves of the market. So that's just a reminder to anyone that's still, saying old parroted statements from prior cycles, that it is time to evolve your perspective and evolve your mindset. And most importantly, adopt the institutional mindset when it comes to patience, long-term holding, and even viewing which tokens have the best use case. You should look at it from the institutional lens and acquire the tokens that institutions are highlighting. And you have to have access to the institutional reports to know which tokens they're highlighting, to know how to position yourselves for the future post this bull cycle.
Yeah, I love that statement. Um, we're talking about the kind of, and we've been broadly talking about the tokenization of money via stablecoins. And there's two components to that, really. There's the tokenization of the dollars and perhaps the tokenization of treasuries that back them up, although we've largely not seen that yet. There's still a very small amount of treasuries and money market funds that have actually been tokenized. Tokenization is a massive topic. What we've kind of looked at is the evolution of money, and we've gone onto some tangents in and around that. But when we talk about tokenization of real world assets, this is another major trend that the cryptocurrency markets are going to enable. And it's all part of bringing us into this kind of world of the internet of value. We're communicating on the internet of information right now. Wells Fargo said the internet of value perhaps has more reaching ramifications and could be bigger than the internet of information. Certainly from a wealth creation point of view, I think they were talking about. What are you seeing in regards to tokenization outside of stable coins and perhaps the other half of that, which would be the tokenization of treasuries and debt? What are you seeing more broadly? Because DTCC are talking about bringing $100 trillion of their securities on chain. Where are we at with this? We're very early on, I think, this, just like we are crypto's embrace of the world more broadly.
I agree that we are certainly in the early days of real world asset tokenization, and this is certainly will be one of the top value generators for public blockchains over the long term, as all of the world's assets has to be digitalized. And I would say um, a similar occurrence that reinforces this belief is that can you imagine a business or a company that doesn't have an internet presence or a digital footprint or a website?
Yep.
Imagine an
No.
asset with that is assigned financial value that isn't tokenized, isn't represented on the blockchain, isn't tradable via a token over the internet. That's the reason why every financial asset has to be tokenized, simply because in the future, when every asset is tokenized, that will increase the use case and the utility of physical objects, and having a piece of financial a financial instrument that's not tokenized, you're simply going to be missing out on the digital economy and the value generation that's taking place within real world asset tokenization, that's being taken place on these public blockchains. Even as someone that isn't a crypto holder, you would just simply want your assets tokenized, simply to have them easier to manage, easier to move, easier to sell and trade, generate yield on those assets. So the next few years will certainly see a large acceleration of real world asset tokenization across all asset classes regarding gold, real estate, anything that you can name with the financial value on it that's going to be tokenized. Anything that's already paper based, any paper-based process or Excel-based process, those are the first assets to be tokenized regarding, I would say, bonds, debt, credit, et cetera, anything that can be easily represented in a digital manner. That's on the first of the list to be tokenized, but in the long term, real estate as well. But I would say one of the most compelling topics regarding real world asset tokenization is the yield generation opportunity when it comes to short-term treasuries or money market funds. These are safe forms of passive income that are going to be tokenized as well. And crypto whales are on record saying that the profits from the 2025 bull cycle, they're going to rotate those profits into yield generating real tokenized real world assets. So people who are looking for, I would say, methods and strategies to to manage their wealth that is created from the cycle, targeting will yield generating real world assets, tokenized real world assets should be a focus of yours as a crypto holder at this phase of the cycle. So that's certainly some free game that I believe anyone can take advantage of, is looking for yield generating tokenized real world assets to rotate your 2025 crypto profits into.
Yeah, I love everything you said there. Certainly about these real world assets or the assets that already exist in the world can benefit greatly from the unlock that tokenization brings, like allowing them to be used and utilized in DeFi protocols. For example, gold. I have this conversation with a lot of people. If you look at why we moved off of using gold as a currency, it was due to convenience. Well, tokenization reinstates that. It also implements sort of track and traceability. However, the gold community, and I think rightfully so, has been somewhat resistant to this because ultimately it's all about monetary sovereignty and kind of custodying your own gold and having it physically in your hand. If you tokenize that, it kind of takes that away, but the unlock that it brings in regards to gold's utility, like potentially being used for yield or even as a payment once again. We could almost go back onto a gold standard.
That's exactly what I was going to add. That tokenized gold also brings gold back as a payment method to trade and sell and even fractionalize. It's pretty
Yeah.
hard to cut a slice of gold off if I wanted to share it with you, or sell a piece of it and not sell the whole gold bar. So tokenizing gold as a way to fractionalize it and even store it more safely, store your rights to hold your gold bullions. That is a conversation I've seen being had as well, even with Ripple's acquisition of Medico,
Yep.
institutional grade custody of tokenized assets, and tokenizing gold, and with the Swiss National Bank. That's certainly conversations being had as well. So when you think about just the market cap of gold or just the market cap of precious metals in general, and the utility that will come to precious metal because of real asset tokenization. That's an exciting development that is set to have an impact on the market in the near term as well.
All enabled by DLTs. I mean, it's like crypto is literally the missing piece to so many different puzzles through what it brings. Certainly, Chris Larson in the early days spoke about how it was the missing piece to globalization, and that you kind of need three things, and money and solving how that's globally works is the kind of last piece to it. And I all think this is sort of moving us towards Peter Thiel's 1999 or 1998 vision, where he spoke about the future of money and payments and how essentially you could use anything as a form of payment. You wouldn't just have the choice of using the dollar currency. You could use, doesn't mean the dollar currency won't be the dominant one, for reasons that currencies typically are the dominant way to transact. But you essentially could use anything in real time. And this kind of is almost another Bretton Woods moment where the global monetary system evolves. And Christine Lagarde certainly spoke about that at the People's Bank of China this year. Jerome Powell hinting at another Bretton Woods moment. Um, you know, dollar kind of perhaps in questionability on the back end of the seizures of Russian assets and kind of excluding Russia from their system. It's all very interesting on many levels. And it's hard to ignore this space. It can be quite hard for the likes of me and you to cover everything. But certainly, this is why I love having conversations with yourself when we can kind of get on and share experiences and opinions on things and try and work out a future. Smoke, I really want to ask you about a catalyst that you potentially see in the cryptocurrency markets as a black swan or a blow up event, and that is Tether. Now, I'm going to play the devil's advocate here because I actually think that Tether and USDT isn't going anywhere. However, I could be wrong, and I'd love to get your take on why you see this as a potential catalyst for disaster.
No problem. And I completely agree why you would I completely see why you have that perspective of Tether may have a place in the future, but I personally have seen enough regarding Tether and its history and even its current standing um from from statements in high places like the Federal Reserve of America that stated that Tether has risky assets as of 2025 on its balance sheet. But regarding the departure of Tether eventually from the cryptocurrency market and being replaced by compliant alternatives like RLUSD and USDC, that process is happening right now. And you can observe that and look this up yourself that USDT dominance is declining for the first time in its history. Now, that's not bullish at all when we see the stablecoin developments and the stablecoin advancements that are happening regarding uh, legislation and clarity. Stablecoin market capitalization is skyrocketing, yet Tether's dominance is leveling out and declining. And that is because of rapidly rising compliant alternatives like RUSD and USDC that are much more uh, have a stricter regulatory requirements than Tether, which operates in international gray areas. They even own precious metals and Bitcoin and even unknown assets on their balance sheets, which is not
Yep.
allowed by the Genius Act as well. And just having history of not being truthful on their statements of their assets, and even firing their auditor to avoid um, having third-party external audits and simply relying on attestations, which are not the same thing as third-party audits. Tether is just playing a dangerous game in the compliant realm, and I would say my predictions and views of it is I don't think it's going to be as dramatic as retail investors envision and theorize it to be. However, that decline is happening as we speak regarding it Tether losing market share to compliant alternatives, and I do believe that there may be some aspects of the cryptocurrency market where we will see devastating effects because there are major portions of the cryptocurrency market that is propped up simply by Tether and its liquidity, as many coins
Agreed.
only have Tether as its only trading pair. So the decline of Tether or even the disappearance of Tether would have catastrophic impacts on meme coins, speculative tokens, but utility tokens that don't rely on Tether and its utility and rely on organic demand, like the XRP Ledger Network and ROUSD and even other compliant tokens that don't rely on Tether, they will thrive, while other meme coins and other tokens that are pairs to Tether will fail as regulatory clarity becomes a reality.
Yeah, we are definitely seeing USDT dominance decline. We are seeing USDT dominant, not dominance, market cap continue to excel. You know, people. I mean, Tether is still the most dominant stablecoin by miles. It is losing ground in terms of dominance. That's perhaps due to competitors being introduced, more regulatory compliant in the United States competitors. I just think I find it so interesting that there are those questions around the assets that Tether hold. Overwhelmingly, they are US Treasuries. You're talking maybe of $164 billion worth of Tether's market cap. 140 billion, 120 billion are in treasuries. There is Bitcoin in that as well, in the remainders. There's precious metals, like you mentioned. And that does make them perhaps non-MiCA compliant, but they're more, I think, looking for a
Not just
broader
MiCA
jurisdiction.
compliant, but Genius Act compliant as well, which requires 100% of short-term treasury bills or cash equivalents.
The really interesting thing with this is when Trump kind of gave his post Genius Act speech, Paolo was there and he actually personally gave him a shout out.
You want to know my rebuttal to that?
Absolutely.
There was an entire FTX arena in the United
Yes.
States
Yeah, yeah.
that, and we're familiar with what FTX represented corruption wise and bribe wise. Sam Bankman-Fried was invited into Congress and took pictures with politicians and congressmen.
Yep.
Um, and we see the fate that Sam Bankman-Fried and FTX ended up as a company and being one of the most fraudulent occurrences ever in cryptocurrency history. So just the good marketing and proper placement of certain names and certain companies, that doesn't necessarily dictate its future or its success. And I think that is what many people are being misled by, is just good PR, good pictures, good positioning. When again, Sam Bankman-Fried, FTX was in similar lights, was a very profitable company, had a lot of cosigns and a lot of powerful names co-sign the network and co-sign the exchange, and Sam Bankman-Fried himself, even though he was very shady on the surface, and Tether is very shady on the surface and behind the scenes. So I don't think the placement of the CEO of Tether next to Trump during the Genius Act signing detracts from all the real data that exists behind it and its lack of compliance and also risky assets on its balance sheet.
Yeah. So what do you think? I mean, how do you think that unfolds? I mean, it's obviously very different. I always kind of riff this. I think that they maybe engineered Luna and FTX and things like this to clear the way for the only thing being able to back stable coins through kind of getting your fingers burnt would be kind of US debt. Um, People forget that Tether and FTX, there was a relationship there, of course. You know, Tether gave some pretty large loans out to FTX. So how do you think this unfolds? Do you think, let's say, for example, Tether is estimates do differ. According to their report that came out in the end of June, they'd say they're about 70+% backed by treasuries and money market funds. Let's say that 30%. Do you think that 30% something happens with that and causes an imbalance? I mean, how do you think that the sort of unfold takes place, or do you think that they're maybe not being truthful about what they actually hold? Maybe walk us through that, because this is, I mean, it's going to have big ramifications.
So I do believe that there's two ways for a company to I would say lose dominance, lose market share. And one of the ways is from insolvency and the other way is from um just regulatory or
Okay.
regulations and legislation. We clearly can see or clearly can tell that Tether is not running low on funds or running low on cash. So they're not going to, you know, go out of business from insolvency or from losing cash. But there are several instances of Tether being delisted. There are several instances of Tether not being included in certain regulations and certain language regarding legislation. So that exclusion, that consistent choosing of compliant technologies and compliant stablecoins over Tether will have a detrimental impact on its adoption and potential in the future. And that will continue to be observed in its decline, its continued decline, and lack of use, lack of listings that can all contribute to Tether not being as dominant as it is in the future compared to how it is today.
Yeah. Do you not think it could maybe pick up use cases elsewhere, like parts of Asia, and play a role in dollarizing those, or South America, for example, which Paolo, of course, has spoke about being specifically interested in? In regards to the sort of Mika compliance, you kind of said, well, we're focused elsewhere. And I thought, hang on, Europe's a huge market. But then I thought, well, there's a rest of the world out there, and maybe he plays a bigger role in what the United States is trying to do, and that's dollarize the world through this technology.
I've never heard of a company completely ignore an entire continent and be
Yeah.
successful if they want to be an international business. So that's a red flag as well. But being an offshore company that operates in gray areas and even reports from United States agencies of Tether being the stablecoin of choice for criminals and illicit activity, that is the red flags go on. You can just go on my page and look up hashtag the Tether files and have over 100 posts discussing all of the suspicious and outright corrupt things regarding the Tether stablecoin. Of course, if you look at the market today, if you look at trade and activity and volume today, that wouldn't matter to you. But as you spoken about earlier, having imagination and being able to imagine things that aren't necessarily
Yep.
a reality yet, that's called having conviction. And that's conviction comes from research and homework. And I have the ability to imagine a reality that isn't necessarily in existence yet. And not being a person that needs to be believe it until I see it, that's typically too late. And that's the mindset that a lot of retail investors have is not believing something until they see it or waiting until prices reflect it, when in actuality prices are a lagging indicator of any development in this market. So preparing ahead of time, anticipating what's next and doing your homework and researching what's next, and most importantly, using the institutional perspective and lens and the data that they use and the research reports that they rely on to develop their strategies. That's how you truly become a winner in this bull cycle moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. We shall see how the Tether saga unplays or unfolds. Smoke, every time I have you on, I learn a hell of a lot. I know my audience does, and I really want to thank you on behalf of myself, my audience. We love having you on. These conversations are just amazing to be a part of. Smoke, where should people go? We know you've got the Smoke Room, which is nothing short of Alpha providing. Obviously, your Twitter, there's a link for in the description. Smoke, where should people go if they want to learn more from yourself?
So on X, you can find me at SMQKEDQG. No spaces. That's the only social media account I have right now. And of course, in the link in my bio, you can find access to the smoke room. And that's if you really want to take your crypto investment knowledge to the next level and peek behind the curtain to see how institutions are positioning themselves for the bull cycle, which altcoins to be in, why you should be into those altcoins, what institutional mindsets you should adopt to be successful in this cycle moving forward, and even post bull run strategies that you can easily implement to share the success of smart money post this bull cycle. That's we cover all of that in the smoke room. So if you're interested and ready to level up your crypto knowledge, that's where you can find extended mentorship from myself.
Guys, we've heard nothing but great things about the Smoke Room. Do go and check it out. Smoke is truly an asset to all of us in the cryptocurrency space. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for watching. And Smoke, thanks for coming on, mate.
Thanks for having me, Rupert.